Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Jennifer and thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to share how I mass produced 8 thank you cards. So come along with me as I craft. So these are some examples of thank you cards that I made a few days ago to show you where I'm headed. I'm using patterned paper to make these really simple thank you cards. When you don't have a lot of time, patterned paper and some die cuts can make some quick and beautiful thank you cards. So for these, I actually used some pattern paper that kind of mimics alcohol ink that has some foiling in the background, and that's what I'm going to do on the next one as well. So I'm using 2 different pattern paper packs from the Craft Consortium. Ink Drops Candy is the first one that you'll see me flipping through, and then Ink Drops Ocean. And these are 12 by 12 pattern paper packs. I'm going to use those because I can cut them down and get multiple backgrounds out of one sheet of paper. My cards today are going to be a 2-size cards, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to be using the Flourishing Blooms cover plate die from Simon Says Stamp that you'll see on the screen there as my cover. So quickly, I'm just going to cut these down, and I'm able to get I believe 4 out of each. So 4 panels out of each 12 by 12 sheet because they are going to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to cut them just a little bit smaller than that because my Simon Says Stamp Flourishing Blooms cover plate will cover an entire card. So I want to make sure that my pattern paper doesn't stick out of that. So here you see me just cutting the paper down. So I have 4 backgrounds from that first sheet, and I will get 4 backgrounds from the second sheet. And then I'll just save the rest for another project. These are really pretty. They don't have any foiling in them, but they have kind of some pretty shimmer in them, different colors. So I thought they would look pretty behind my cover plate die. I'm also going to be using the sentiment and shadow layer from this PinkFresh Studios die set that I'll link below. And what I've done off camera is I have die cut all of my sentiments and all of my cover plates. I die cut my cover plates out of just white 110-pound Nina Classic Crest Solar White paper. And then I die cut all of my sentiments out of gold cardstock. And then I cut the shadow layers out of a variety of colors that I thought might match the backgrounds that I'm making. So now you're just going to see me basically do assembly line style. So I'm using the Barely Art glue to add all of my cover plates to all of my backgrounds, my patterned paper backgrounds. They are kind of delicate, so you do need to be careful. And you'll see that some of the centers of my flowers did pop out, so I will put those back in later. I got smart here, and I actually held that on kind of a scratch piece of paper while I was gluing so that it wasn't flopping around. So it really does help to have that Barely Art glue because it does have a fine tip, and it's really easy to apply glue to small details. You do want to be careful when you're gluing these because you don't want your frame to get kind of wonky. You'll see a little bit later that I definitely had one of mine get wonky, but what I'm going to do is I'm essentially going to make it look a little bit different than the other cards and trim it down. So there you see that I'm just adding those centers back into my flowers. You can leave them out if you want, but I liked them in. And then I'm just putting acrylic blocks over top to make sure that the glue gets nice and adhered. So again, it's just assembly style. So if you die cut a bunch of things one day and then you die cut the sentiments another day and then the pattern paper another day, it really doesn't take a lot of time, or you can do it all at once like I did. And I will tell you by the end of the video, it took me about an hour, maybe less, to make 8 cards. So I'm just using acrylic blocks as I go between them to make sure that my flowers and background get really well adhered to the pattern paper panel. And you do kind of have to work quickly because that glue does dry kind of quickly. So just be mindful of making sure you get little bits glued where you want it to stick down. You especially want to glue the frame part. I didn't put glue on every little thin stem because the flowers were going to hold it down, but I was making sure I got glue adhered so that it wouldn't, you know, fall off or anything like that. And I just keep working. It really didn't take that long once I had everything cut. The thing that took the longest was just die cutting these. I did die cut these off screen, and I used my Anna Griffin Impress electronic die cutting machine, which I would highly recommend. Here you can see I tried to glue it by putting the die cut face down and then the pattern paper on the back. That did not work so well just because I wasn't able to kind of see what I was doing. So I had to, you know, fiddle with that one a little bit. Here we get to where I didn't have all the background pieces punched out. So there is a little bit of delicacy in this die cut panel. So just be mindful when you're popping those out. Make sure that you get a really good cut when you send it through your die cut machine. I did send mine through my die cut machine a couple times when I made these, just because I wanted to make sure that they would pop out easily and I wouldn't have to fiddle with them too much. We're coming up on our last couple here. And while I'm gluing, I just want to say thank you to anybody that's watched my previous 2 videos. Everyone has been so nice and wonderful with their comments and support. So I really, really appreciate that. This is the one I believe that I had some trouble with because it is a thin frame, getting that straight on there. I don't notice it right now, but I notice it later that it's really wonky. I think it's that one. This blue ink drops pattern paper from Craft Consortium looks kind of oceanic to me. It's really, really pretty. And I do believe they make this pattern paper in 6x6 pads as well. I will make sure I link anything below that I can. But you can use whatever pattern paper you like, or you can make your own backgrounds. I just wanted to show how I quickly made these cards by mass producing, by just doing the die cutting and then using the pattern paper. Because I'm going to use these for thank yous for Christmas gifts and, you know, birthday gifts and things like that. So I wanted them to be fast and easy so that I could get those thank yous out relatively quickly for our friends and families who've gifted us presents this year. And again, having a big acrylic block or just anything heavy helps kind of flatten that out, make sure that it stays nice and flat while it dries. So I'm just putting a little bit of glue in the centers of those flowers that popped out and any leaves that are popping up. Once we're done with this, I'm going to then go on to the next kind of assembly line step, and I'm going to glue all of my sentiments down to the shadow layers and then down to the card. So I did a basic thank you sentiment and then the shadow layer out of some colored cardstock. I have multiple different brands of colored cardstock. I think there's some Concord and Ninth, Gina K, Simon Says Stamp in there. I just picked, mixed and matched anything that I thought would look good with my backgrounds that I had picked. And I'll make sure I link the die set from PinkFresh Studios as well. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now, but it's got several sentiments with shadow layers in that set, so it's a really good basic to have. So off to the right, you can see my shadow layers in lots of different colors, and then all my little gold sentiments, and there are all my panels so far. And I'm just kind of seeing what shadow layer looks best with each card and picking out what I like best. I end up cutting a couple more off camera really quickly because I didn't like a few of them. And I'll save those again for another project. And what I'm doing to save time and so that I don't forget what I liked is I'm placing the shadow layer with the card panel that I want it to go with. Again, it's all about that kind of assembly line. If you find a design that you like, go with it and stick with it and kind of see what you can do in little batches. So that was kind of my plan here. The yellow and that kind of violet color are the ones that I don't end up using, that I'll save for another time. Now I found with putting any sort of die cut together, especially if it's kind of delicate, having some reverse tweezers is really, really helpful. And a tip that I have learned is that when you're picking up your die cut, pick it up the way you're going to place it down and then flip it over to glue it on your shadow layer. I hope that makes sense. That way you're not having to like fiddle with your tweezers once you go to glue it on. Again, I'm making great use of my acrylic block, so anytime I have one glued, I'm then using my acrylic blocks to hold it down. You could also, layer these up with additional die cuts to give it some dimension. On my kind of practice cards that I did end up popping up my die cuts on the shadow layer. For these cards, though, I'm going to keep it simple because they're just supposed to be basic, simple thank you cards, and I think they look beautiful as is. So I'm just going through and I'm gluing down each little word. These are really nice and easy to glue down because the shadow layer kind of tells you where to place the actual sentiment. It's also all connected, or at least each word is connected to itself, so there's not any letters that you have to worry about. There's not any, the tittle or the dot of an I to worry about. So it's pretty easy to glue down and get it placed so that it looks nice. This is actually my favorite background. I just love all the rainbow colors. You can see me trimming off a tiny bit on the edge, and that's just where a little bit of my pattern paper was peeking through, which is why I tried to trim them all a little shorter in the beginning. But if you don't get it placed quite right, then you might have a little peeking through. So those long shears, those are the longer Tim Holtz shears or scissors, and they work really well at trimming like long things off like that. So that sometimes happens, and it's not a big deal. You could also use a paper trimmer or a craft knife. The scissors for me is just easier to grab. I think you could use pattern paper and a die cut like this, any sort of panel that has some open space to make these cards. This is where I noticed that this one is really wonky, so it's not really rectangular anymore. It's just wobbly. So I'm kind of trying to figure out at this point what I want to do. Do I want to keep it, not keep it? I'm going to show you what I'm going to do later. What I'm going to end up doing is cutting it down and changing it from a portrait card to a landscape card. And I think it actually came out really pretty, so we'll look at that one in just a minute. Again, just gluing, putting my acrylic blocks on there. We're getting to the last couple here, and then we'll put the rest of these cards together. Thank you cards are probably what I send out the most, thank you and birthday cards. So I'm probably going to make more of these just so I have some on hand. But I would be curious to know kind of what cards do you send out the most? Do you have a lot of congratulation cards? Do you send out a lot of encouragement cards? I send a lot of thank yous, and then I try to do as many birthdays as I can. I would love for 2023 to make it a goal to really make and send more cards. I do have a almost 2-year-old at home, so my crafting time is limited. Again, another reason why I wanted to mass produce these is to just get, more bang for my buck and use up that pattern paper. I know many crafters, including myself, just have stacks of it. All right, so here's where you're going to see me cut down my layer that's really wonky. So I'm lining it up with the lines on my trimmer so that it remains square or proportional, if that makes sense. And I believe the end panel ends up to be 3 3/4 by 5. So it's just smaller than an A2, but it's still the same proportion. And I'm going to end up just putting this on my card base right now because I wanted to see if I would like it. I am making sure that I go back in and glue any little stems that didn't get glue initially. They didn't need it when it still had its white frame around it, but now that I've chopped that off, I just want to make sure that doesn't go anywhere. So I'm going to actually grab a white card base here in just a second and go ahead and glue this one down. So now you can see those are the cards I made previously. I did pop up the shadow layers. With these ones, I'm not going to. I don't think it necessarily needs it. I thought I was going to chop that or glue that other one down. I guess I'm going to glue the sentiments down first. This is a pretty thick colored cardstock that my shadow layer is cut out of. So it really does have some nice stability. Nothing is, you know, super floppy or anything like that. You could definitely add some extra gem sequins. You could make this into a really pretty shaker if you wanted to. For simplicity's sake, again, I just went simple. Yeah, and I'm also fiddling around with which side I want to be up and which side I want to be down. It doesn't necessarily matter, but there might be the color of your shadow layer might look better against one portion of the pattern. So that's kind of what I was looking for. And again, using that big acrylic block to make sure everything is staying nice and glued. I don't want anything to come apart in the mail or anything like that. And I didn't talk about this earlier, but this cover die, I've seen it colored. I've seen it ink blended. It is really, really pretty. You don't see the details too well in this, but it's really got a lot of detail that can lend itself to a lot of different applications. I just kept it white because I thought it was pretty on its own. Now you're seeing where I take that smaller background that I cut down and I'm just placing it in the center of my card base. This is a landscape card base that I had created, and that gives it a nice white border without having, you know, the frame that it initially had. So it does look different than the rest of my cards. So I have 7 cards that are the same design, and then that 8th card is a little bit different. But as you can see, as I kind of go through these, I think they're all really, really pretty. They have some shine from the gold sentiment. They have some interest and pretty color in the background. And again, that's pattern paper, so I didn't have to make that. While we love making our ink blended backgrounds, alcohol ink backgrounds, sometimes pattern paper is, you know, an easy way to go and still get a beautiful result. So I ended up having 8 cards made today, and then the other 3 that I made previously that are the same design. So there they are. I will again make sure I link anything I can below. If you do have questions about any of the products I used or anything I did in the video, please let me know. I really, really appreciate all the kind words and encouragement. I love sharing my card making. I've only been making cards for about 2 years, so it's really been a big part of my life, and it's what brings me joy, so I hope to share that with you as well. Thank you for watching. I hope you found some of these ideas helpful and inspiring for your next cards. If you would like to like and subscribe and find me over on Instagram, I will put all those details below. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you next time. Thanks.